Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We'll just give it a minute while people come in. How are you today, Jim? Thanks for stepping in and helping out
No
with it.
problem. So,
Just give a minute for people to come in and then we'll
sure.
start. All right. Oh, there's Joel over there. Hi, Joel. Miss you, mate. Joel Archer. We used to work together a year or so back. Anyway, 2 years now.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay, let's make a start. If I can introduce myself, my name is Roger Cressy. I'm the owner of Mindshift USA, and I work quite closely with Bravantia in the UK as well as an associate director for them. But my mainstay here today is that I'm a volunteer along with a number of other people on the board of the AnDOUC, and I'm largely responsible for hosting TechCasts and getting involved with sponsorship and things with along with others. But we're always looking for new people. So if you have a desire to be part of the community and join us, that would be fantastic. Jason, I'm very pleased to see you.
Hi.
I'm gonna stop sharing, Jason, and let you take over, okay?
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Okay. So just so everybody is aware, we were actually filibustering while Jason was coming along. But if I just take you through the beginning, we're talking today about backup, cloning, and DR for Oracle Analytics Cloud. A couple of things to mention, some housekeeping before I hand over to Jason. Can we go to the next slide, sir?
Yep.
And just to talk about TechCast, so we've got an amazing library of very interesting TechCasts, things that are still applicable even as the technology moves forward. There's some good business process and principle stuff as well as technology, and it's usually cutting edge. So things that you'll see, we go all the way back to 2019 on the archives. We've got on December the 12th, Unlocking Insights, Mastering Data Storytelling with Oracle Analytics, and that's with Phil Godfrey. So he's also always an interesting, I want to say entertainer, but he does usually give us some very good knowledge. So if you do have something cutting edge or something Oracle, specifically Oracle Tech, or database, analytics, spatial and graph, please do submit your abstracts to this andouc.org/techcasts page. Next slide, sir. Ways to join the community. We've got obviously the website that's always going to keep you informed about what's going on. All of these TechCasts get published to YouTube, so you will see the fame and glory of Jason forevermore on the ether. We obviously have an X account. We should probably change the Twitter label to X, but anyway, there's Facebook, LinkedIn. My favorite, which is why I leave it to last, is Slack. There is a lot of people, including Oracle product management, who are involved in that. So please do feel free. This deck will be made available to people. You can join these. I'll try while Jason is speaking and copy and paste them into the chat. Next slide, sir.
There we go.
So this is probably the most important slide of the intros. Just to let you know, we are once again having an in-person summit April 8th to the 10th, 2025. So it'll be in Building 300, the Oracle Conference Center, Redwood Shores. It's always a very concentrated, productive time. We have a lot of Oracle product management there. We have a lot of very highly technical people coming and sharing their knowledge with us. It's a great learning. We have hands-on labs. We'd really also just the chance to rub shoulders and network with others doing the same sort of thing that you might be in terms of implementing Oracle technologies. So with that, if I can just introduce Jason, he's basically been dealing with Oracle databases and Oracle technology for 30 years and has followed it through all the iterations. He says he's striving to become a DBA, but he pretty much knows everything that's going on with this technology. And so without further ado, I was going to make him do penance for coming late, but I think we
gave you a chance to talk.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to hand over to you. So if you can introduce yourself more.
Yeah, I will do, absolutely. So yeah, just to align you, I run a team of primarily Oracle DBAs in the UK, working for Capgemini. We used to call ourselves the Oracle DBA team. We now call ourselves Cloud Infrastructure Engineering in sort of alignment with the way the market goes. I started off as a developer on Oracle eBusiness 10.7 Smart Clients, doing forms and reports and PL SQL. Became a DBA. Then became an architect, so I'm very much a techie. So there will be some of the stuff in here that I won't say I've made it up, but there'll be some of the stuff in here which when I talk about Oracle Analytics from a business perspective, it might not be entirely accurate, but because I'm not an analytics developer, I'm a techie guy. But hopefully I've got most of it correct. I'll talk about the technology. I'll talk about some of the challenges. I think the request was to hold questions to the end, and we will have a question and answer session. I think you can paste questions into the chat channel, and the moderators will keep an eye on that and post them. There's a Q&A. There you go, on the chat from Roger. There's a Q&A chat channel. If you stick them in there, they will collate them, and then we'll cover those. There'll be time at the end of this to talk about questions. So without further ado, let me talk about, there's a few things just to align you to make sure that we're all talking the same language. So we'll talk about architecture options, and many of you hopefully will recognize this as the standard Oracle Analytics model. There's normally three components. You've got the Oracle Analytics engine, which is the thing that makes all the pretty pictures and the graphs. You've got some sort of database behind Oracle Analytics, and the recommendation from Oracle these days is Oracle Autonomous Database. So you will store your data in the Oracle Autonomous Database, although it is possible to take direct feeds from live systems. And there's some reasons not to do that, and I'll talk about that in a second. But what you generally will do is you'll have an ETL layer, and I'll talk about Oracle Data Integrator, ODI, which will extract data from a source system and will extract, transform, and load it, ETL, to put that data into your autonomous database. So why behind Oracle Analytics do you have a data warehouse? Why not just have the Oracle Analytics layer? And we've got some people who load files into Oracle Analytics clouds and use it directly. And it's really about performance and how data is used. So most systems that customers have will be what's called an OLTP, online transaction processing system. So in my case, it's generally Oracle eBusiness, but it might be any, it might be PeopleSoft, it might be JD Edwards, whatever the system is that you've got that stores your data. And the purpose of an OLTP system is to be able to allow you to quickly retrieve records and make updates, deletes, and whatever. And if one of the people, Fred Smith or Jane Bloggs, ends up getting married and they change their name, you want to be able to update that record in your OLTP system very, very quickly, because your administrator types in the new name, they hit save, and they want an immediate response back to say that's been saved. So what an OLTP system does is it breaks the data into relatively small tables, but those tables are all interjoined, and that's called data normalization. But what a warehouse wants to do is it wants to take that big data set and report on it very quickly without going through the overhead of joining tables together. And so what you do is you take those two little tables there and you create one big table, which makes reporting quicker. So that was a very brief segue, just because I'm going to be talking about ETL processes and things like that, and various other bits and pieces. But this is just to align us all to the same thing, I hope. So let's talk about scenarios. So as an OAC administrator, there's a number of scenarios we want to consider. One is cloning. You want to create a new environment because your developers always want to be working on a copy of production or a copy of production, and you want to have multiple environments. You might have 10 developers. You want to give them all an environment, and there are some challenges with having multiple environments, but fundamentally, you want to give people the ability to work in non-production environments, but those non-production environments need to be kept up to date. So when you make changes to your production environment, you're going to somehow want to get those changes replicated down to the development environments. And so cloning, which is the method of taking an environment and duplicating it somewhere else, is the best way. Backups, well, that's really important. You get a developer who releases the code to the wrong environment, or they release some code without it being fully tested and it causes a problem, and you need to revert that change. You need to have, and the developer goes, oh, I forgot to take a backup. There are some ways to take backups in Oracle Analytics and in the database and various other things, but a lot of those rely on users to do things before, in order to revert that. And if the user forgets, then you could end up with a scenario where the environments, you've lost some data. User error, user's done something wrong. Accidentally dropping a table in the wrong environment, or dropping a column on a table and losing a load of data, and they just want to get it back. And the final one I'll cover is disaster recovery. So Oracle Analytics doesn't have a multi-region disaster recovery capability built into the application at the moment. This presentation may become null and void tomorrow if Oracle suddenly come out with a methodology, but as of today, there isn't a way to replicate into a second region. Some organizations require the 50-kilometer sort of separation of environments in order to tick their disaster recovery things. So all of the environments are slightly different in what you would do in that scenario, but they all follow a very, very similar process. So how you get the data, how you back up the data, how you restore the data is very similar in each scenario, but we'll cover those each in turn. So let's talk about each of the components. And like, as was said at the start of the call, don't worry about trying to write down any of this or read any of the slightly small print. This deck will be available after the presentation, so you can read through this. But the first component is that data warehouse, the Oracle Autonomous Database. This is Oracle's innovative database product. It's based on the core database product. So Autonomous Database 23 AI is based on the 23 the Oracle Database 23 AI that's available to install on premise. It's pretty much the same product, but it's got a load of automation, a load of wrappers around it. So it does automated backup, it does automated monitoring, it does automated capacity management, it does, you can add storage with the click of a button. You can look at performance. It should automatically index the data to make it as performant as possible. It also does automated cross-region disaster recovery, so you can establish a copy of your autonomous database in another region with the click of a button. There's a lot of automation around standard sort of business as usual functions. So you can clone it, you can restore it, you can flash back to last night's or yesterday's or 23:06 and 10 seconds yesterday. And all of that is controllable via APIs, so it can all be scripted. It comes with a pre-built and managed Apex layer, which is really useful because sometimes you want to be able to play with data. And one example was we've used the Apex layer rather than use Oracle IAM groups to control permissions. We've created for one of our customers. They want the help desk to be able to grant and revoke access to reports, to individual reports to people. And so we've put in place a user-friendly Apex screen to allow them to do that rather than have to go into Oracle IAM, which isn't the most user-friendly system. The autonomous database will store both the warehouse data and the ODI configuration. So Oracle Data Integrator writes its configuration to a database. Well, you can use the same autonomous database for doing both. And like I said, the backup, recovery, and cloning. There's Oracle OCI native capabilities. If you click the cloning button, you sit and go and have a coffee and the sandwich, and you come back, and an hour later you've got a clone of an exact copy of your environment in the same availability domain, in a different availability domain, if a different region or part of the world. It's pretty much the click of a button. The other way of doing backup and recovery is the old-fashioned way, which is doing schemas, exports, and imports, where the disadvantage of using the cloning is that when you clone the environment, you get a brand new environment which has a new IP address and a new name and whatever. And so if you've got things pointing at that environment, you've got to repoint all the things. Whereas if you do an export import, what you're doing is you're scooping the inside out of the environment and replacing it with a copy, but leaving the shell, all of the important stuff like its address and things intact, which makes relinking things after your clone significantly easier. Bear in mind that if you're cloning production down to pre-prod, you may want to, depends on where your ETL environment points to, but you may want to end up clearing down the warehouse and running a full ETL and various other bits and pieces like that. So it's very important when doing cloning to consider the time and effort a clone will take. How long is it going to take to do the clone, but also any subsidiary activities like running an ETL afterwards. The environment I'm working on at the moment, the ETL takes a full ETL takes about 8 hours. So we have to add 8 hours to the end of our cloning time because we have to clear down our warehouse and rebuild it. It's also worth, when you're cloning an environment, to consider data that isn't dynamic. So most of the customers I deal with, they have a single source system, which is something like Oracle eBusiness, and they read the warehouse is just there for reporting against that eBusiness data. They don't archive the data, they don't purge the data. eBusiness just grows bigger and bigger and bigger every day. And so when we need to rebuild the data, we just clear down everything in the warehouse and reload it using a full ETL from production. But there are some people who will use the warehouse to store static data that's generated once, loaded into the warehouse, and if you lost it, you would never have the ability to regenerate that because the source system it's come from is gone. Or if you wanted to archive data from a legacy system or whatever. So when you're cloning an environment, it's worth considering that static data that doesn't come from a source system or gets generated once, and not to overwrite that. So that's something that your DBA, your administrator, needs to take into account. ODI, Oracle Data Integrator. There's a couple of, the traditional method I was always taught was ETL, extract, transform, load. So you take the data from your source system, you transform it, you create that star schema, whatever it is, to allow it to be, denormalized from that multiple table into bigger tables. And in the denormalized schema, you end up with a lot of duplicates of data, where the whole idea of normalization is you reduce the duplicates. But you might have 4 tables that all store purchasing data, and they just store it slightly differently, and each one is optimized for a different report or a different view, and that's perfectly normal. And so you'd extract it, transform it, and then load it into the final things. Often you would therefore have staging tables, where you extract the data, staging tables, and then manipulate them and then put them into the final tables. There's an extract, load, and transform, where you do the load and the transform all in one go, which seems to be gaining in popularity in a lot of systems. ODI and the other option that we see a lot of use of is Golden Gate. The two products are both available on the Oracle Marketplace. So to deploy this environment, you click a button to deploy Oracle Analytics. You can click a button to deploy Oracle Autonomous Database, and you can click a button to install Oracle Data Integrator, all without having to get your DBA. Historically, if you were doing something in OBIE, for example, your DBA would have had to install the database. They would have had to install ODI. They would have had to install OBIE on top of it. This is all sort of serviced from the OCI console, so it's very easy to replicate these environments, and especially with ODI, because all of the configuration is stored in the database. If something went wrong with your ODI instance, or if you wanted to upgrade your ODI instance, all you do is deploy a new version from the marketplace, link it back to the data set in your autonomous database, and you're up and running straight away. So it makes administration, maintenance, and cloning and disaster recovery, which I'll come on to later, significantly easier. Okay, so the final one is Oracle Analytics. Obviously, the baby of the system, the thing that needs most of it, sort of is the majority of the rest of the presentation. Within Oracle Analytics, there is an option to take a snapshot, and I've highlighted there in the console. And before a developer deploys a new dashboard or something, the idea is they should go into that and they should click snapshot, and then if something goes wrong, if they make a mistake, they can revert that back by restoring the snapshot. But what happens if the developer forgets to click that button? Well, fortunately, Oracle have provided an API to allow you to take snapshots outside of Oracle Analytics. So it is possible to get that snapshot. And the great thing about APIs is they can be called from a command line, so you can schedule them, you can script them, and you'll see there in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got a dev, a pre-prod, a sit, and there's a UAT just off the bottom of the screen, and we're keeping 5 snapshots a week, 5 snapshots for each environment. We cycle through them, so it deletes the older one when it takes it, and so every day we take a snapshot, and if tomorrow a developer does something silly and deletes something they shouldn't have, or something goes wrong and something gets corrupted in the work they're doing, we now have a backup of Oracle Analytics Cloud. Oracle do take backups of these products, but the backups are provided for Oracle purposes only. So you can't ask Oracle to restore Oracle Analytics to yesterday. So if you want to have a backup of Oracle Analytics, you must use this methodology. There isn't any other methodology for automated backups of Oracle Analytics Cloud. So What it does is it creates a snapshot, saves it into an OCI bucket, as you see there in the bottom right. And then you can use that snapshot to either restore an environment in the event of something going horribly wrong, or to create a new environment. So you could use that as the idea is you would stand up an empty Oracle Analytics environment, then restore the snapshot over the top of it, and you've got an instant copy of where that environment was at that point in time. And I'll talk about that a bit later in the rest of the presentation. So I'm just going to go a little bit techie now, so hopefully your eyes don't glaze over when I go into this. But the API does need authenticating, so you have to go into Oracle IAM. It used to be IDCS, it's now IAM, although there are still a lot of references to IDCS within the API. You have to create an application is created automatically when you register an Oracle Analytics environment into a domain. And what you have to do is you have to go and register a user. You have to once you've created this application, you have to allocate it to an account. That account will then be used for the API for authentication. There's a whole bunch of bits and pieces you have to do. Halfway down, and if you click the OAuth configuration button, there's this thing called resources. You have to add the environment you want to be able to use the API to. Even though the environment's already registered to the application, you have to tell it that you're going to use an API. So it's one of the things they don't mention. And interestingly enough, in the API, they talk about the URL. And the first time I did this, I was using the Oracle Analytics URL, thinking, well, why isn't this working? And it turns out you get a completely different URL when you register Oracle Analytics as an API to be able to invoke the APIs. And you'll see there the HTTPS and a strange list of characters. I've had to mask some of it out. A strange list of characters that have no bearing whatsoever on the environment that actually what you've called it, whether it's UAT or pre-prod or whatever. There's a few things you have to grant, and most of this is covered in the documentation, which there is a link of towards the end of the presentation, so you can pick that up if you look at the presentation later. The API is a little bit old school in the way it works. So what you have to do is the first thing when you invoke the API is you have to create a token. And the token is this, you see in the bottom box there, it's this huge chunk of characters. It's about 2,500 character token that is generated. The tokens last, I think the default is about 100 seconds, then they expire and you've got to generate a new token. You'll see in the API call at the top that it's asked for my username and password. So that's the account that we associated the application to. The IDCS client, you get that from the OCI console, and the URL is that weird URL that gets created when you tell the IAM that it wants to be able to be used for APIs. Once you've got your token, you can then invoke the APIs, and there's a whole bunch of different APIs that can do things. They do. Is that the same one? Yes, that's the next page. Right. Okay. So then what we want to do is we want to create a snapshot, and the snapshot, which I said writes to an OCI bucket, takes as an input a JSON file, and there's an example of the JSON file there on the right hand side. So basically the JSON file, you have to provide a whole bunch of credentials to it, which are very similar to the credentials you use in fact, they're exactly the same as the credentials you use in the OCI APIs, region, tenancy, user ID, fingerprint, and private key. And you pass that information to the similar API, but this one has got the /snapshots at the end of it. it posts the JSON file, and what that will do is, if that's all successful, you'll get a message that it was 100% completed, comes back pretty instantaneous, but it returns a work request ID. So then there's another API called work requests where you can pass in the work request ID, and it will tell you the status of that work request. So the way we do it is we submit that first one, and then we loop around that second one, with a 30-second pause in between each loop, checking and checking and checking until the request is completed. And then effectively you'll go to your OCI bucket and you'll see a file in there. The default is .bar for some reason, I'm not sure what, but you'll see the file name is specified in the JSON file. And actually what we do is we build those JSON files dynamically. So you'll see it says snapshot -24/11/17. So we build that date and time in dynamically at the time we run the API. So we've got a template file that we generate the JSON file from, and when we execute the API, we generate the JSON file with the current date and time in, so that each snapshot has the current date and time in it. Not much more of this to go, but when we're performing a restore, it's a very similar process. You first have to get a token, then you call a snapshot, which has got a JSON file in. The JSON file is very similar to the previous one, but it's called a restore. Instead of, if you look at the previous one, you'll see the type is create at the top of the JSON file. On the JSON file for the restore, the type is restore. So they're very similar JSON files. What you have to do is you have to pass in a snapshot ID, and the snapshot IDs are the snapshots that the OAC environment knows about. If you're trying to restore a snapshot from production to UAT, for example, UAT won't know about snapshots. So the first thing you have to do is register the snapshot with UAT and then tell UAT to then restore that snapshot. So you have to first register the snapshot and then do a restore. It's worth noting that when you do a snapshot within the application and click the restore button in the application, it does give you the option of which components in the snapshot you want to restore. Do you want to just restore some data? Do you want to restore some reports? Whatever. When you're doing the snapshot restore using the API, it backs up the whole of Oracle Analytics and restores the whole of Oracle Analytics. So it doesn't give you the ability to do partial restores. It's an all or nothing. When you invoke the restore API, it returns a work request in the same way that the backup did. Unfortunately, it almost immediately goes to 100% and reports that it's successful, even though the restore actually happens in the background and can sometimes take up to half an hour depending on the size of your restore. Because what that means is it means it has successfully loaded the snapshot into the OAC engine. The OAC engine then takes about half an hour to process that snapshot, and during that time you'll find that Oracle Analytics just looks really weird. So if for example you've got users in there or groups in there, they will be there 1 minute and then the next minute they'll be the from the snapshot. So it restores things in chunks, and it's not logical or obvious where it comes from, which makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I personally would like the snapshots restored to be running at a percentage and not be 100% till it was finished, but it is the way it is. It's worth noting that when you restore the snapshot, it restores everything, including any permissions. So you need to make sure, and this is one thing that tripped us up, you need to make sure that the user you are doing the backup and the restore exists in both systems as an administrator. And what we found was we tried to do a restore from production to UAT using a specific user, and we got halfway through the UAT restore, and then it replaced all the user permissions, and the user we were running on suddenly didn't have administrative privilege, and the restore fell over halfway, which left the environment effectively unusable. So, you know, there's things you just need to think about these things in advance and make sure that you've planned it all out. Quickly preparing for the worst. You know, we want to talk about what changes every day, and those are the things you need to think about backing up and how you do it. The data in the warehouse changes every day, but that's fine. Autonomous database will back up on a regular basis, and if you've got a second site, it's effectively doing real-time replication to the second site. So if something happens in your primary, you can get to your backup and you know, do partial restores, and actually restores of autonomous database can be to the second. So you can restore to 21, 36 and 5 seconds last night, even though actually that was in the middle of a day, and you don't have an explicit backup for that point in time because of the way Oracle databases work. OSC reports, dashboards, configurations, backups. We can use the external snapshots for those. Integration configurations, well, the integration instance is deployed from the marketplace. It's vanilla from the marketplace, and all of its configuration is stored in the autonomous database anyway. And you can replicate all this to a second location, whether it's a region. Autonomous database can be replicated real time. Integration instance doesn't change, but any configuration is stored in the database. And you know, the snapshot will cover your RPD and a logical layer. It will cover dashboards, reports, custom builds, and everything else. Thinking about each individual component, you know, if we've got a second availability domain or a second region, in fact, in this case, we could have autonomous database, active passive replication using standard functionality. That's fine. ODI, we deploy it from the marketplace and reconnect it to the autonomous database. So that's up and running without us having to do much. Object storage, we can use cross-region replication, or if it's in a different availability domain, it's just available. If it's a different region, then you can use cross-region replication to replicate the object storage to another place, and then we restore the snapshots. You know, the way to do that, and basically our disaster recovery methodology, basically we replicate in our case, we replicate the autonomous database, and we replicate the object storage. And then if we have to go into a disaster recovery, we would then deploy an ODI instance, and you build Oracle Analytics by deploying a blank instance and then loading the Oracle Analytics instance from our snapshot. Day to day, you know, thinking about disasters, human errors, and we've talked about some of them. Deploying code to a wrong environment, deleting some data. For both of those, the best solution we've come up with is what you could do is, if someone accidentally does something in production they shouldn't have, you could restore last night's production backup to another environment, extract just the bits, because you wouldn't want to just restore last night's production backup over the top of production, because then you lose everything that happened since that backup. But you could restore it to another environment, just extract the bits that have gone wrong, whether it's a report or a table or some data, and then inject those back into your production environment to fix it. So so you don't reduce take the whole environment off, because generally during a restore, an environment is unavailable until the restore is finished. Clones for developer, you know, developers always want to have the latest version. They always want to have the latest code. So we give them a copy of production. It also means that, for example, our user acceptance test before doing a major UAT cycle will clone production down to UAT, which means UAT is exactly the same as production, deploy our code to UAT, and then we know that what is being tested in UAT is as close to what is going to go into production as possible. what we've done is you can also do things to save money. So you can automatically shut down environments. So Oracle Analytics, Autonomous Database, ODI instances can all be shut down overnight. So we find that, we've got a whole bunch of development environments which are used 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. most nights. And you can save 60% of the cost of an Oracle Analytics environment by shutting it down outside of those hours. Shut it down at 6 p.m. on an evening, start it up at 8 a.m. the next morning, leave it down Saturday and Sunday, and generally that, like I said, that will save you about 60% of your environment. And there's ways to automate the startup and shutdown. There's some really great blogs on that, which I can point you to if you're interested. The other thing is, the challenge with that is that a developer might want to work late tomorrow night, and so they don't want the environment to go down because they want to work late. So what we did was, and those screenshots are from a portal we built for our users, and we're adding more functionality to it every day, where we can give the ability for developers. So if a developer wants, they're working on an environment, they go, yeah, this is a bit old, I want it to be a current copy of production. The challenge is that DBAs and admins are always a bottleneck to developers. So since everything I've just talked about can all be controlled through an API, the backup of and restore of Autonomous, ODI, OAC can all be controlled through an API. Well, we can script that, and we've created an Apex-based portal that sits on top of the Autonomous database. So it's there out of the box, which allows users to say, well, actually, it's 6 o'clock tonight. Tomorrow when I come in at 8 a.m., I want my development environment number 12, to be a copy of production from last night. Click the button, they go home, come back tomorrow morning, your administrator hasn't had to do anything, and they've got a nice, fresh, sparkly environment all fully configured. Or I don't want it to shut down this weekend because I'm going to be working, so they can modify the backup, the start and stop schedule to say, don't shut down this weekend because I want the environment to be up and running. The great thing is, in this case, we also extract all the costing information from OCI, and we can tell a developer exactly how much their environment costs to run an hour. So if they decide they want it running, there is a cost implication to them running it for the next 12 hours. And we record who it was, why they did it, ask them for a bit of description. And then at the end of the month, if I'm a project manager and I see that my spend has gone up, I know exactly who to come and ask about why my spend has gone up, because their name was tagged against the request to keep the environment up. So that's sort of the idea of the presentation. I'm happy to take any questions anyone has. So if anyone's got any questions or wants to ask me anything about the various bits and pieces, there's a couple of helpful links in the thing. I talked about Oracle Autonomous Cloud. You can try it for free, there's a couple of labs and an API reference, and then there's some links there at the bottom where you can get in touch with me, and some of this stuff is covered in my blog as well. So shameless link to my blog. If you go to jasonlesterdba.wordpress.com, there is a blog specifically on backup and recovery, and then interesting enough, snapshots, OCI snapshots can become quite a problem where they fill up your storage and there's no automated clear down capability for that. So Oracle, I've wrote a blog about maintaining your snapshots. So yeah, so that's it. I don't know, Roger, were there any questions while I was chatting?
We've got two. We had one from Tony Wen, and he was asking if this is available in government cloud.
Yes, actually, I maintain a bunch of customers in UK government cloud, and I work with the sovereign cloud team in the UK, and they've confirmed that all this stuff is available in US government cloud as well. So yeah, this is all available in both the UK and the US government clouds. all of the APIs are available. Some of the syntax is slightly different, and you've got to make sure you get your region right. So instead of UK London 1, it's UK Gov London 1 and things like that. But yeah, all of this functionality is available in Government Cage as well.
Great. And then Joel Archer has asked, can the token generation be automated? As it expires after 100 seconds, how can this part of the process be set up to enable end-to-end automation of snapshot?
Yeah, it's actually, yeah, we hit exactly that problem. So what we did in our we wrote all this in Linux Bash because it was just I wanted to write it in Python and I got a pushback. So we ended up writing it in Linux Bash, and I wrote a function called authenticate, and when you call that function, it goes off and gets the current token, and we just invoke authenticate before everything we do, so that, you know, even though a token lasts 100 seconds, that doesn't mean you can't ask for a token every 10 seconds if you want. You know, there is a limit to how many API calls you do, and Oracle does throttle it if you're making thousands of calls a second. But where I said we've got that thing where we loop around the work request ID, effectively what I did was generate a token, check the work request ID, go to sleep for 20 seconds, generate a token, check the work request ID, go to sleep for 20 seconds. So each time we loop round, and it's really easy to write a little function that when you invoke the function, it returns a token. So you just put it into a little bash script wrapper. But it's really, really easy to do.
Brilliant. Nicely done. Well, that's it. I mean, you've blown everybody away, I think. That was really good. It's actually particularly pertinent to a project I'm working on right now. So interesting. Would you see any limitations in using Visual Builder instead of Apex?
No, none at all. I think the great thing is if you've deployed an autonomous database, you get Apex there and then, you know, and it's got a lot of capabilities and it's already hooked into the database, and Oracle patch it. And we were just being a bit lazy because, you know, it's there, it's hooked in, it's linked, and we found that our developers took to Apex really quickly because it's got a very quick learning curve. So that was really why we used Apex to play around with the direct data. But other than that, you can use anything you want to play around with the underpinning data. And like I said, what's really useful is when you start thinking about this sort of stuff, about being able to clone environments, being able to do backups and restores, is once you give your developers the ability to self-service, the noise for your administration team suddenly drops off. And the administration team and the DBA team can get on with doing the stuff they want to get on with, rather than handling day-to-day requests like, oh, I've just deleted some of the environment, some of my data that I didn't mean to. Well, go and click the button, do it yourself, you know. And you know, everyone ends up happier with that solution because the developers aren't behind a huge queue of production releases that the DBAs are working on, and the DBAs don't have a whole bunch of restores that just take them away from their managers moaning at them that they haven't done stuff. So, you know, it doesn't take a lot once you've scripted some of this stuff up to add a bit of a wrap around it, whether it's Apex or whether it's Visual Builder or whatever the tool is. Doesn't take a lot to create a wrapper and fully automate that process, which, like I said, makes everyone happy.
Yeah. Just one more question from me. It's I know we've got some time, so that's why I don't feel too bad. But you mentioned that you're tracking the costs. Do you find that the costs, giving people the control of their own destiny, have gone up in any way, or are they the same?
I think there's a lot less. Oh, I didn't realize, and I think people are, you know, our project managers were very clear with the developers and said, look, if you want to work a weekend, well, I have no problem with you working a weekend, but you just need to bear in mind that you need to do this. What we have found is, because they're tracking costs, previously before we included the cost tracking, a developer would start the job, we'd see their work for a couple of hours on a Saturday, and then they just leave it up and running over the weekend and forget about it. Now they actually remember to shut it down at the end of their work before they go home. And so, in a certain respect, they've policed their own spend a bit better, which is a nice thing to see. And obviously, this can add quite a significant cost to an environment if you've got a whole bunch of developers all with their own environments, and that also makes it easier to do that as well. If every single person is responsible for their own environment, then give them all their own environment. As long as as long as they are responsible for their own environment, then it makes their lives easier, because I've just made a mistake, I'll restore my environment, rather than I've just made a mistake, now I have to go around the entire office asking anyone if it's going to be okay for me to restore that backup, because I'll blow away their data as well. So there's sort of a pro and a con to it, but I think it's made people more aware of their own spend. I don't think it stops them spending, but I think it has made them more aware of their own spend and a bit more, conscious of what they're doing. And like I said, they shut it down at the end of the day rather than just leave it up.
Yeah, brilliant.
So the one thing I did want to say is, obviously, me and my team and a couple of my colleagues, we are very much in the technical weeds of this stuff, and I think my difficulty on this is, I'd love to present more at these sorts of events, but I don't know what problems people have. If someone gives me a technical problem, I can fix it, but I don't always know what technical problems people have. So I'm more than happy for people to pose questions. If someone has an idea, I know you said they could submit abstracts. Some people don't like talking about that, but they still want to know the answer to their question. And I'm quite happy to either help people write abstracts, or especially if they're technical, or to answer questions by doing an abstract based on a real life problem, because it's always easier to work on real life problems. So if people have specific subjects or areas they want to talk about, more than happy for them to pose that, and I can put them in touch with people who can help them, or do a presentation on a future event.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing we might do, Jason, at some stage is get a whole lot of us in a room and actually have a panel, which is and then the whole session is just Q&A. We like to do that actually at the in-person summit. So I don't know if you've submitted anything for that, Jason, but
I haven't. I'll have to shake the piggy bank, and by the piggy bank I mean my boss, and see whether anything drops out the bottom of it. But yes, it's something. I know one of my colleagues, Abby, will be attending that, but whether I can go as well, I'll need to try and justify.
Yeah, Abby keeps us all in line. Well, all right then. All that really remains then, don't appear to be any more questions. So, Jason, thank you. That was really interesting, and you can never worry. Don't need to worry about being too technical with this audience. It's kind of a trademark of the AnDOUC. We like the technical weeds. So with that, I just thank you so much for today's presentation.
Well, yeah. If someone does think of a question tomorrow or next week or whatever, my LinkedIn profile's there. Please feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and please subscribe to my blog. I love subscriptions. That's all great. Does my number count great. And I'm more than happy to take emails to my if people do have questions. So yeah, please feel free to get in touch if something occurs to you after this.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye now.
Thanks.